everybody. I'm sitting with Kim Rosen. How are you?
Very good. How are you, Warren?
I'm good. I'm rather good. Are you enjoying Summer NAMM?
Summer NAMM is great. Summer NAMM is very hot outside, but nice and cool inside here on the floor.
It is, isn't
it? Yes.
I was waiting for the Uber this morning for about 20 minutes, kept rescheduling. Boy, was it hot at 8:50 a.m.
Yeah. It's brutal, but it's been a great show. A really great day today. Yesterday was a little slower, but today we've got a lot of people coming to
Wonderful.
the booth. Yeah.
Because in a second we'll go and look at it, but you have a lovely new product, which is up here.
Yep.
And the actual concept of this is pretty interesting. I understand why it's good. I know for instance, with mastering engineers, and I want to talk about that obviously with you specifically, and maybe this is a nice gateway drug into it, segue into it. You'll probably notice people that watch the interviews I do with mastering engineers at their studios. Quite often they're running a ton of gear and barely doing anything with it.
Yes. That's kind of part of the allure and the dark art of mastering that a lot of people kind of allude to. Like, they don't know how it's done. And in my opinion, and how I work, which sounds like many other people have also said, that just using my compressor but not compressing. Using my EQ but using it in a much gentler way. Always less than a half a dB of a boost or a cut. I mean, we're talking very small increments here. And so instead of buying one piece of gear to use it in one gentle way, I was looking for something that was more versatile. Something that could do those small little increments or layers in one unit. And how could we create something like that?
Well, it's fantastic. So when I heard about it, well, first of all, you told me about it this time last year when we were at that VK event. But I love the concept.
Yes.
And I know it's not cheap. It's not inexpensive.
No.
But I do know that it will probably help a lot of people out. But already, one of the most famous mastering engineers in the world has bought one.
Yes. Greg Calby, right off the bat, was very interested in it. We had him over to my studio and we showed him my unit that I was using, and he was just kind of wild about it, wanted to get one in his room to hear it, and as soon as he did, it was just message after message. He really loved it, and he just got excited about how functionality just worked right in with his workflow and kind of like did things that he wished he had other pieces of gear to do. So
yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Huge fan of him. I work a lot with Jack Douglas, and Jack is always, talking about him as being incredible.
It was the biggest compliment ever for Greg to really love it as much as he did, because I'm such a fan of his work. Looked up to him for years. So for him to really understand what this unit did and appreciate it and just be so excited about it kind of made all the years of work that we put into it worth it. Absolutely.
I can only imagine. It's pretty amazing. Now the question is then, so how do you get to here? How did you start? What's your sort of journey as a mastering engineer?
So mastering, music has been a huge love of mine. As anybody that's in audio, it's really kind of how you start, and whether that leads to playing music or not. I started being interested in studios, what happens in the studio, recording, mixing, and I got an opportunity to intern at a mastering studio. And it was really cool. I was like, this is neat. And I moved from Massachusetts, where I grew up. I moved to New Jersey to work at this studio. Learned the ropes really fast, did production work and assistant work. And very quickly, it was a very busy indie studio called West Side Music. It was in New Jersey, and the owner's name is Alan Douches. And it was a very busy studio, and he is a very talented mastering engineer, and he just kind of showed me the ropes. I started mastering projects on after hours time, and I worked there for 7 years. And after 7 years, I went out on my own, started my own room, and built it up from there, and haven't looked back. And
how was that process of building up? Because I think the main questions I get are, can't control my low end. My mixes don't translate from one place to another. And then the last one I get, which is just as big, is like, how do I build up my business?
So in terms of mastering or mixing? So mastering, the most important thing that you need to put the most time and focus into is your room. You want to make it as accurate as possible, regardless of what speakers you're using. And after you've made it accurate, then you work your speakers into that and make sure that what they're providing you as music and what you're hearing is accurate. That's just the number one thing. And beyond that, then you build things to suit your taste. I mean, there's endless options out there. but really just making a decision on like what kind of converter you're going to use and what plugins, and you can start with minimal pieces of gear and then learn it. Give yourself time. If you start off in an endless search for newer pieces of gear, better pieces of gear, things to add, this is cool, you lose the focus that you can have when you're working on a more minimalistic kind of setup. And once you learn that and you work really hard to get variety in your work and what you put out using a limited source of options, that's when you really refine your skill, truly. I mean, and then you can build from there beyond that. But you know, if you're starting out, you need an accurate room, you need full range speakers if possible, and then just a decent converter, a couple of pieces of outboard gear. I mean, you can master in the box. There are plenty of mastering engineers, very well-known, very talented mastering engineers that master in the box these days. But I feel like it's important for anyone starting out to acquire some real life knowledge of actual analog outboard gear. It's important.
And how did you build your business?
My business has all been word of mouth. The clients that I worked with when I was working at West Side followed me to my studio when I opened up my own studio. And then beyond that, I started to go out to conferences back when they were having the Potluck Audio Conference, which was the kind of the reiteration of the Tabob Conference. So you go out, you get invited to speak on a panel, you meet people, you give them your card, and I did a lot of test masters in the beginning, free test masters. So it's meeting people, starting a relationship, a friendship, and then providing them with a master that they can decide if they like it or not. And it feels really great when you do that test master and they come back, they're like, wow, this sounds great, I'm going to send you projects.
So what do you think if you were to start again? Would you still do the same version? You would go and find somebody to intern for, then hopefully become an assistant?
So yes, I would still recommend that. I would still do that. I don't think that there's any better way to learn. I think the difficulty is, depending on your location, finding the right studio that fits with you, that they have enough work to give you something to do. It's really difficult to, I don't know, be young and work for not much money. I mean, you should get paid, but you should be willing to kind of do anything. And so in the beginning, that included me, you know, emptying trash and cleaning the toilet and making coffee. I don't think that will ever change. I think that being able to be a part of whatever facility you go to and have the opportunity to work at, that's important. But I think that learning under the watch of someone who's really talented that you respect is really important, and there's nothing that you could read or learn on Gear Sluts or online anywhere that could help you in that way.
It's fantastic. What are you working on at the moment? Apart from this, of
right
course.
Now I have a lot of projects that I'm really excited about. I just mastered the new Rhiannon Giddens release, which is a fantastic, beautiful, beautiful album. She plays banjo and she's an amazingly talented musician. And so the album's got quite a bit of, talk about it. She was just on NPR. And another artist that I just worked on, he's from Ireland. His name is Foy Vance. He is on Ed Sheeran's label. He just made 2 albums, one in Muscle Shoals at Fame Studios,
wow,
and one in Memphis at Sam Phillips Recording.
Amazing.
So he made, they sound amazing. They are true to the location in which he recorded, all original songs. And I had not heard of him before working on this mastering, but I'm hooked. He is absolutely amazing. Everybody should check him out.
That's great. That's exciting to work with that kind of music, stuff that's player-based,
yes,
song-based, recorded in beautiful studios.
Yes. It's really great, and it feels like a trade. It makes it feel less like work. It never really feels like work. It's just listening to music all day. It's cool.
That's amazing. You touched on working predominantly in analog. I assume, though, are you using some digital stuff?
I am.
Rise, smile.
I am, and I only smile largely because when I did start on my own and I did not have gear, it was kind of an unexpected situation, and I was encouraged by some clients of mine to do it in the box. And so initially, I tried to do what I wanted by using plugins. And this was in 2009, and I tried, and I found I could not do it. So very quickly, when I was building my own room, I realized that I did need some stuff. So I started out with Lavery Blue converters, and I got a couple of pieces of gear. I got a Fern VT7 compressor, which is really the cornerstone of my chain, and an Avalon 2055 EQ. And that really started, it allowed me to finally do mastering in my own space the way that I wanted to. And so building on from there, getting some pieces from Pendulum, and some really great plugins. I really love FabFilter plugins. I do a little bit of processing before I send mixes out through my analog chain. So if I need to do any kind of surgical EQ to help adjust something very precisely, I'll do it before I send the music out to my analog chain using the FabFilter EQ plugin. And then I'll use my analog gear, and then I'll come back in, and then I might do some additional processing using my final limiters that I have. I'll use one, maybe two, and then sometimes.
What are you using for limiting?
So I am desperately holding on to my TC brick wall limiter. I do not have a System 6000, which is a part of where you actually get that plugin. I have this really old thing called the PowerCore TC processor that allowed me to get the license for this this limiter that I feel is super transparent, very, very just wonderful at making it really easy to do what I need to do in that final stage before I record it in. I also use the FabFilter Pro L limiter if I need a little something extra. But that brick wall limiter is my workhorse, and that's usually how I combine them together. And then sometimes I might do some additional EQ work after, or some other plugins to use their output gain to get some volume instead of pushing my limiters too hard. So.
Are you mastering in other formats other than stereo?
I am not. No, I'm not doing any surround. I do not get asked to do that. I find it interesting because I am not as educated in that. It would be a little bit more of a reach for me to educate myself while I started working on that. So maybe someday.
I'm interested because somebody told me yesterday that Netflix is asking for everything now to be Atmos ready, Immersive ready.
And is that 5.1?
Well,
or is it more than 5.1?
Like
is that like
19.3
right.
or so, I don't know. It's a lot of speakers.
So the mastering engineers that are, able to do that are the ones that are going to get all the business from this, and good for them.
Well, it's interesting. I don't know if anybody's really geared up to do it yet, because you have the room in Blackbird and you have room in Capitol, and maybe other people are putting rooms together. But the Blackbird room is being put together as we speak.
I've seen those photographs. It's absolutely amazing.
So yeah, I just wondered, I don't even know if there's going to be mastering involved.
Well, there could always just be a piece of software that they split a stereo file into the the pieces that they need to be Atmos ready. I mean, that's possible, and probably more likely. I don't see them waiting for mastering engineers to get on board to be able to provide that for them.
So talking of formats, though, since we're in that world, what are you receiving, and what are you always having to make?
So I'm receiving all different sample rates of final stereo mixes. I very seldom receive any tape to master from, which is a shame, but it is what it is. I would say a majority of the files I get are typically 96 or 48, and then a smaller percentage are 88 or 44. And so I'll master, and then I master a lot for vinyl, which is a lot of fun.
And what do people require for the final result for vinyl?
So final files for vinyl would be one long continuous file for each side of the record. If it's 2 sides of a record, 4 sides of a record, if it's a double LP. And then I include a track list that shows start times for all of the songs for the cutting engineer to know where to drop those. And they're all high-res files. So if they sent in their mixes at 2496, I provide these continuous files as 2496 for the vinyl engineer to cut from.
Fantastic. You never upsample. There's not like a higher. If it starts at 48, you keep it at 48.
There's no reason.
No reason, yeah.
And I mean, you could, if I was doing pitching and catching, which means I'm using one computer, I'm playing out through my analog chain. I can capture at a different sample rate if I wanted to. That's better than upsampling, but still, I mean, the real way to get a 96K file is to record it as such.
Absolutely.
So. And then beyond vinyl, there is streaming, which has become a bit of a interesting place to be. Apple was really great in giving us mastering engineers tools so that we can evaluate their compression codec. So they're mastered for iTunes. They said, here's the tools. You can take your high-res 24-bit file and use this tool, and it will show you how it will sound in our store and for streaming. Now, places like Spotify, they do not do that. They do not provide us with the tool to audition. There are some plugins that say they can help you audition what it might sound like. I have never heard it, but I don't know. I think it's still just a guess. I don't know that it's an actual official, Spotify gave us this information, this is correct. I think it's just their interpretation of what is happening with Spotify. So it's created this really difficult position where how do we prepare these files in the best way for Spotify? We don't really know, it's all just guess. So I use my ears, make it sound good for a CD. I'll make my adjustments for master for iTunes MFIT files, and sometimes I will send those same files off for Spotify streaming as well. As a best guess, what we're really just looking to do when it comes to streaming files and digital distribution is to eliminate intersample peaking, which when you're listening on low quality playback systems, earbuds, computer speakers, it can result in distortion. That is the goal. Like everybody talks about intersample peaking, we just want it to sound better. If you don't do these things, if you have too much intersample peaking, you will hear an audible distortion on these low quality playback systems. And how do most people listen to music when they're out and they're streaming? Earbuds. So anything we can do to help the listener enjoy their music more, even if they don't understand it or know why. It's kind of our job to help facilitate that, and that's what I think.
Yes, I love it. I've had this conversation. In fact, probably it came up in when we did the panel together last year. It's kind of a catch-22, isn't it? Because we're all very aware of where everything's going, and it's fantastic that you're keeping up with it. But the reality is like we're in such a better place than we were. Than when I was a kid, everybody was holding like radios to their ears or boom boxes, and it's so.
I mean, we have such heated conversations about LUFS and what level we should be mastering to and how to make it sound its best, and I think that it just takes the focus away from the music and enjoying the music, and I think that's if we just keep that in mind as we're finalizing these files, we want people to enjoy this and to not have to think about it or not condemn them for listening on earbuds.
Exactly, I think that's the bit. I like that.
It's just it is what it is, and it's not a matter of telling people what they should like or it should be better or how you're doing it isn't the best way. It's just let's just make it easy for them. Let's just make it sound as good as we can.
And like, how many of us had the parents that had like $1,000 system when $1,000 was a lot of money, and this vinyl player that's suspended on whatever. My parents didn't have that. We just had whatever we had.
Well, I'll tell you, one of my best memories growing up, I must have been 12 years old. I had my own stereo in my room and I played CDs, but on this particular day, it was a snow day. I wasn't going outside. We had a home stereo with a bunch of vinyl records that nobody listened to. So I opened up the case and I connected the speakers and I plugged everything in and I popped on a record and I listened to the record. And I will never forget that, and that record was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, one of my favorite records to date. But I wasn't thinking of how it sounded or didn't sound good. I was just enjoying the music, which is what a majority of people do when they listen to their music. So we'll do what we can to make it sound great and try not to fuss over it too much. Sure. And move on to the next project. And
yeah, I think, isn't it interesting? I feel like audio versus video, because I remember having a similar experience with being at my aunt and uncle's house, and they were like the wealthy members of our family. They're wonderful people, but they had a VCR. When VCRs were like, woo, VCR. And so they all went out for a walk in the back garden, and I stayed in. The garden was large. And I saw that they had a video of Help, and I watched it. I must have been 11. And just being like, wow. God, if I went back and look at that video now, it's probably pixelated and terrible and all.
Grainy. Yeah. Oh, yeah. there's something to be said about how something makes you feel. So whether it's a video or whether it's audio, we can toil over all of these things, but really the impact of how something makes you feel is more than, this low-level distortion or what you're listening on. I mean, you can still have a feeling from hearing a song, from the lyrics, from the performance. And so, that's why we keep working at it. And I wish that people would take more time to focus on that as opposed to all the other things. I think that as technology progresses, that some of what we obsess over right now will become unimportant, and we'll have some more solutions for us as engineers to really just do the best we can and continuing moving forward.
Marvelous. Well, let's go and check out this, because it's over there. So we were just talking about the wonderful world of the black magic of mastering, and how you'll go to all of these great mastering engineers we grew up listening to, and they've got 10 pieces of equipment and no meters are moving and stuff, and it's all about the load, the transformers, the tubes, the this and the that. So when you told me about this last year, I was like, that makes sense. Put it all together in one unit. So was that a good intro to what it does?
A very good intro, and really honestly, a compressor, an EQ, they have a very specific, intention for what they can do. And a lot of times in mastering, the way that I work is that I might not be using my compressor to compress, but the compressor that I'm using, it's going to impart a sound in mastering. And so I wanted something that was more versatile, that could impart that sound in many more ways, that we could just add up to something that's really great. And so that's what we did with this. So this is a tube loading amplifier. Right here is the main section. It's the loading section. Right here we're going to be loading the tube to add harmonic distortion, a little bit of that tube, not necessarily color, but feel. When you're using the loading knob, we are also auto padding the gain. So loading the tube and not hearing any kind of gain difference. Okay, and we have 3 ways that we deal with that padding. We are padding the input signal before it hits the tube, before we load the tube. Post, we're padding the input signal after we hit the tube. Not hearing any level increase at all here. But on the last selection open, we are eliminating the padding, and you just hear tube gain. So it's going to increase gain and increase the tube loading. Within this section, there is a clean mode and a bloom mode. And this is just how we're loading the tube, how we're hitting the tube. Kind of the name of it is what it's doing. This is a cleaner selection. This is more of that tube sound. Beyond this loading section, we have a parallel lift filter. Here, we're going to have a subtle high-frequency lift, low-frequency lift, or both. Because it's parallel, it's nice and gentle, it gets affected by this loading section and gets blended back in afterwards so that it's very light. Here we have transformer. We can be completely transformerless when it's set to out, and then we have 2 ways of loading the transformer for 2 different kind of layers of sound. We have a solid state output, 11 dB of boost and cut, and because it's stepped, it was really important to us to make it easily recallable. But because it's in 1 dB steps, we wanted something that could really refine it. So the resolution switch down here could add a half dB or a quarter dB, depending on what you might need, which is sometimes really a big difference in mastering. So that's really the gist of it. It's really great to be able to spend about 20 minutes with this unit, really understand the controls, and then work your way through adding the layers in different ways and different amounts and see what it does. It's completely program dependent, so it may work in one way on one kind of music on rock and roll, but you try the same setting on something else, very different. So it's a lot of fun to use. I've been using it since we finished our prototype, and it's still really just a blast.
Fantastic. Well, thanks ever so much for showing it.
Thanks for talking with me, Warren.
Any comments and questions, please leave them below.